Tonight, inflation roiling. The Federal Reserve steps in, making a final decision over raising interest rates. The short-term and long-term economic repercussions. Plus, tensions peaking.
If he were to move in with all those forces, it would be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world.
Russian President Vladimir Putin amassing forces on the Ukrainian border. And menacing lawmakers, the violent threats to members of Congress.
That is dangerous for people's safety, and it is deeply dangerous for our democracy.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Shake up on the Supreme Court. Good evening and thanks for joining us. In Washington, D.C., I'm Jenna Browder. A high court surprise today. Justice Stephen Breyer planning to retire. The liberal-leaning justice stepping aside in a move that will give President Biden a chance to nominate a new Supreme Court justice. Breyer, at 83 years old, is the senior member of the Supreme Court, appointed in 1994 by President Bill Clinton. Since the death of liberal-leaning Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her replacement by Trump-appointed Justice Amy Coney Barrett, a Democrat-led campaign to nudge Breyer into an early retirement has been underway. For his part, Justice Breyer, whose opinions tended more moderate liberal, has said judges are, quote, loyal to the rule of law, not to the political party that helped to secure their appointment. He's expected to step down at the end of this current term. And for more on this, we're joined by CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, this came as a big surprise to a lot of us today. Talk to us about Justice Breyer's legacy and what kind of mark did he leave on the high court?
Well, I think there's two words that come to mind: a liberal linchpin. That's what he has been. He's been a solid, reliable liberal vote on this court. And if you start to read some of the press releases that are coming in from many of these liberal groups, you'll get a sense of his legacy. The Human Rights Campaign, pro-LGBT group, calling him a wonderful hero of the movement. And you just go down the list: Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, all with very, very kind words. And look, I mean, the truth of the matter is, you know, Stephen Breyer not only has been a liberal, solid vote for them on that side, but beyond all of that, he's had two key votes on two real key issues. Lawrence v. Texas, which in essence allowed the legal or constitutionally allowed sexual activity in all 50 states. And then, of course, the Obergefell decision legalizing same-sex marriage. So those were two big ones that Stephen Breyer took part in. He's been there, 28 years or so. So, you know, it's a legacy that has some serious ramifications here in the United States.
President Biden is now set to nominate his first Supreme Court justice, faced with a 50-50 Democrat-controlled Senate. The president has committed to nominating a black woman. One name, David, being floated out there is Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, someone who's already been, you know, vetted and confirmed for her spot, replacing now Attorney General Merrick Garland on the U.S. Court of Appeals. How big of a fight are we in for here?
Well, I don't know if we're in for that big of a fight. There'll always be kind of like that baseline fight, right, as it relates to the Supreme Court, and everybody will have their say. But the truth of the matter is, as we know, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Joe Biden is going to nominate a liberal to replace a liberal in Stephen Breyer, and that doesn't shake up the ideological makeup of the court. So I don't think we're going to have we're not going to have the Brett Kavanaugh fireworks, so we're not going to have any of that for sure, or even the Amy Coney Barrett fireworks, and for that matter, not even the Neil Gorsuch fireworks. So I don't think we're going to see any of that. But at the same time, it's always going to be a production, and there'll be a lot of drama. And then you never know how, kind of like as the justice turns, we'll have to see exactly who they nominate. But I think Justice Brown will definitely be the front runner. And let's also remember that she's, like you said, she was vetted. She's at the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Those are two very important aspects that you need to kind of move forward. Make sure you're vetted and you're at a pretty important court in the country.
David, could this give Democrats at this point a much-needed political win?
Well, I guess so. Sure, to a degree, it might have some help for them in their liberal base to a degree, but I don't think it's going to really help them much in the midterms at all. I think this is ultimately about Stephen Breyer retiring now instead of after the midterms. And why is that exactly? Because Democrats know they're going to get a shellacking in the midterms. At least that's the way it appears now. And so therefore, the Democrats were concerned that Mitch McConnell and the Republicans would take over the Senate. And then what would happen? Well, Biden at that point would nominate someone if Breyer retired. The problem is that what if Democrats have 45 senators, 46 senators instead of 50 now? And so therefore, you're going to get a more of a liberal candidate now that Biden's going to put up as compared to if Republicans had the Senate that in November. Then it'll be much different. It'll be more of a center right or center left, candidate.
All right, David Brody, good to see you. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Well, to the economy, the U.S. Central Bank is inching closer to raising interest rates. If they hold true to their newly released policy statement, it would be the first rate hike in 3 years. CBN News correspondent Brody Carter joins us with how policymakers are hopeful to keep price gains under control amid record inflation. Brody?
Jenna, today the Federal Reserve signaled it's likely to raise U.S. interest rates to combat inflation in March. No specific date or path of policies was given, however, leaving room for a lot of ambiguity, mostly driven by COVID uncertainties. Here's Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell.
The federal funds rate is our primary means of adjusting monetary policy, and that reducing our balance sheet will occur after the process of raising interest rates has begun.
The Federal Reserve will likely withdraw its pandemic-era support with the hope that raising interest rates and certainly curtailing the central bank's presence in financial markets will help slow the pace of inflation, which currently stands well above the Fed's long-term goal of 2%. Now, the increase would start from their current near zero level, that is, to not only fight inflation, but also lower economic risks posed by COVID, recent market volatility, and anticipated turmoil between Russia and Ukraine. Now, the Fed's first priority is controlling inflation, which has risen at its fastest pace in nearly 40 years. The plan is to stabilize prices for consumers. Now, to do so, the central bank also plans to shrink their balance sheet of government-backed debt soon after the undisclosed date that they've chosen to raise interest rates, a move that would also cool down the economy. The Fed indicating that we're at the mercy of the pandemic.
Health experts are finding that the Omicron variant has not been as virulent as previous strains of the virus, and they expect that cases will drop off rapidly. If the wave passes quickly, the economic effects should as well.
Some economists, that is, they're fearful that a future rate increase could rattle both investors and consumers. Today, major markets rallied after a dismal 6-day loss only to drop to a session low. This happening as Powell gave his speech on a rate increase. A recent Gallup poll indicates a majority of Americans think inflation will continue to go up, half of which predict it will rise by a lot. Officials will not release new economic projections until March. Critics are worried the Fed is stepping in too late. Others fear they could act too aggressively. Jenna, back to you.
All right, Brody Carter in the newsroom, thank you. And let's bring in Stephen Moore, chairman of the Freedom Works Task Force on Economic Revival. Steve, welcome. So the Federal Reserve making it official today, set to raise interest rates as soon as March amid this record inflation that we're seeing. Is this the right move, Steve?
No, I mean, the Fed has been really wrong for the last 10 months or so. They should have started raising interest rates almost a year ago. This is how we let this inflation cat out of the bag, with the delays by the Fed. First, they said there was no inflation. Then in the summer, they said it was temporary. Now they're admitting finally that it's, quote, entrenched, but they're not doing anything about it. I mean, the Fed should have acted long ago. I don't understand why why are they waiting till March to raise rates? We have 7% inflation in consumer prices. We've got 10% increases over the last year in producer prices. If that's not inflation, what is? And I don't understand the delay. They should also be reducing their balance sheet, which is over $7 trillion in assets that they own. So I'm frustrated, and I don't understand the logic of continuing to allow this very permissive, dovish monetary policy that is going to allow inflation to continue to fester. By the way, the price of oil hit $86 a barrel today. That, Jenna, is the equivalent of soon we'll have $4 a gallon gasoline at the pump. That's inflation.
Yeah. They're saying as many as 4 hikes. We had a guest on yesterday who was saying each of those 4 hikes as much as 1/4 of a point each. Steve, what are the short-term and the long-term effects here? What are they going to be for the economy?
Well, see, the Fed has now put itself in a very, very precarious position. And by the way, Joe Biden, of course, also deserves a lot of the blame for this runaway inflation we're seeing, because he has spent trillions and trillions of dollars over the last year, his first year in office, in debt spending. And when you continue to pour debt into the economy, when you print money to pay for it, that's going to cause inflation. And so you've got Jerome Powell and President Biden, who are both equally responsible for these higher prices. And incidentally, where I live, Jenna, we're also starting to see empty shelves in the grocery store. So that's kind of scary, too, for people. But I worry that when the Fed now has to raise rates, that's going to slow down the economy a little bit. And then you could get the dreaded S word, which is stagflation, which is the combination of high inflation and a slowing economy.
You mentioned, the spending with the Biden administration. The Biden administration says that its multi-trillion-dollar Build Back Better plan is actually the key to bringing down inflation. Your thoughts on that, Steve?
Right. Well, that, of course, is a laughable line. I don't think any rational people believe that. Borrowing another $3 trillion and spending another $5 trillion and pushing all that cheap money into the economy is somehow going to lower prices. It's actually kind of delusional. It's kind of frightening the president would say something like that. But, thankfully, the one thing that's going right in the last month or so is that, thank God for Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, and Kristen Sinema, the senator from Arizona, who are both Democrats, who have brought a screeching halt this crazy $5 trillion spending bill on top of the $4 trillion they already spent last year, on top of the $6 trillion budget they're passing. I mean, we're spending money like they're M&Ms out there right now. And of course, I mean, that's what third world countries do. That's what Argentina and Venezuela and Zimbabwe do. And that story never has a happy ending. So we got to get Washington spending and printing money and all of the debt. We got to get that under control immediately.
Yeah. All right, Stephen Moore with Freedom Works. It's always good to see you. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Jenna.
Well, looking overseas tonight, tensions reaching a fever pitch in Ukraine as Russia has mobilized as many as 100,000 troops along the Ukrainian border. The U.S. delivering an official response to Moscow, setting out a diplomatic path forward for Russia. The State Department outlining today U.S. and NATO concerns over Russia's actions.
There should be no doubt about our seriousness of purpose when it comes to diplomacy, and we're acting with equal focus and force to bolster Ukraine's defenses and prepare a swift, united response to further Russian aggression.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken speaking as 3 more U.S. deliveries of military assistance arrive in Ukraine containing Javelin missiles and ammunition. More deliveries are on the way. Meanwhile, 8,500 U.S. troops remain on heightened alert. Coming up, this week is National School Choice Week. What that means for public schools and new ways of learning. Tonight, as students, parents, and teachers reel from the effects of COVID-19 lockdowns, the issue of school choice is front and center. This week is National School Choice Week as school districts across the country cope with sporadic closures and virtual learning due to the pandemic. Oklahoma Republican Senator James Lankford issuing a resolution calling for educational options for students. Quote, parents should have the ability to choose a school for their child based on their child's individual needs, academic goals, and personal religious beliefs. And here with us now, Jonathan Butcher, the Will Skillman Fellow in Education at the Heritage Foundation. Jonathan, thanks for coming on the show tonight. So, we of course hear a lot about talk about school choice. Talk to us about what that really is.
Well, happening right now, just in the past week or 10 days, we've seen schools closing again in Washington State, in California, but also Tennessee and Ohio. So this is a very real issue for parents right now as they have to figure out what to do for their children. We've seen grades drop with increases in D's and F's across the country really over the past year and a half, attributable to the forced virtual learning during the pandemic, which simply has not met the needs of every child that's been assigned to it. So during National School Choice Week, we can talk about ways that parents should have hope. We have proposals now under consideration in places like South Carolina, as well as elsewhere in the country, such as Oklahoma, including Oklahoma, that would give parents more options. And the great news about School Choice Week this year is that now we're talking not just about student achievement, but also about ways to preserve parents' most closely held beliefs. Parents have been largely dismissed over the past year by left-leaning lawmakers when it comes to their comments at school board meetings and elsewhere. So this is a chance for school choice to demonstrate that we are interested in both student success as well as protecting those values that families hold dear.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that remote learning is a poor substitute for in-person schooling. Many public school districts are involved in some controversial teaching techniques, but do either of these factors mean that we should devote less and not more money to public schools?
The amount of new money going to public schools now is eye-popping. We're talking about $200 billion over the multiple bills of COVID relief just over the past year that have gone to public schools. It's come so fast that they can't even spend it. At last count, just a few weeks ago, we were talking about maybe 10% of the money that has been sent to schools has been used by these public schools. And yet we were told ongoing through the pandemic that schools desperately needed this money to keep themselves open. The reality is that money is not directly related to student success. What we have the opportunity to do, especially through state proposals to give parents more options for their children, is a way to protect the future for students and their success on their academics, as well as the chance for parents to choose a learning option based on their values, based on their beliefs. And that's what both public and private school choice offers to families.
Yeah, school choice might provide a clear benefit for a lot of minorities and parents and students who want to homeschool or send their kids to private schools or charter schools. But for the vast majority of the public who relies on public schools, could implementing school choice do more harm than good?
Research shows that there are not harmful effects on public schools when students leave to use private school options or charter school options. There's, in fact, improvements in some cases in desegregating schools, as well as in political involvement and levels of tolerance, according to research about the benefits of school choice. So the benefits come not just in the form of more students being able to choose how and where they learn, but we also see benefits in their involvement in both local community as well as political engagement when it comes to accepting other beliefs and becoming active in their community, as well as, in some cases, improved student achievement. We've seen improved graduation rates in Washington, D.C. among students using private school scholarships there, and the only federal private school choice learning option. So the future is bright for families who are looking for ways to help meet their child's unique needs.
All right, Jonathan Butcher with the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you.
And when we come back, violent threats against lawmakers, why some lawmakers are turning to private security firms to stay safe. Dangerous for democracy. That's how Attorney General Merrick Garland referred to a surge in threats of violence against lawmakers. U.S. Capitol Police say they're committed to keeping members of Congress safe, but severe staff shortages have them treading water to keep up with the threats. As CBN News national security correspondent Caitlin Burke reports, this has some lawmakers turning to private security firms for help.
The number of threats against members of Congress has tripled since 2017, with nearly 10,000 reported just last year. Many come in the form of verbal assaults.
A member of Congress was threatened in a gruesome voicemail that asked if she had ever seen what a .50 caliber shell does to a human head. Another member of Congress, an Iraq War veteran and Purple Heart recipient, received threats that left her terrified for her family.
Attorney General Merrick Garland says we can't risk this kind of action becoming normalized.
That is dangerous for people's safety, and it is deeply dangerous for our democracy.
While U.S. Capitol Police is tasked with protecting lawmakers, Chief Tom Manger says they face a shortage of nearly 450 agents.
We're going to have to nearly double the number of agents that work those threat cases. We've increased the number over the last couple of years by necessity, but even now it needs to be increased even more.
Despite that level of security, some lawmakers have sought outside protection.
That means having doing intelligence research before events. It means identifying people who are sending you hate mail. You're building security into your day-to-day life.
Chris Ryan with K2 Integrity has helped oversee both physical and online security for political clients. He blames the growth in these threats on a general increase in misbehavior.
You're seeing a level of behavior across the population that you just never really saw before. And whether it's built up frustration from COVID or just a general coarsening of American society, nobody really knows exactly what's happening, but there's no doubt that it is happening, and it's certainly happening in politics.
He advises elected officials to make security a priority beginning on day one.
Typically, security firms get drawn in when something has already happened, and we're now reacting to something as to being proactive. So we advise everyone, be proactive in your security.
Ryan calls the angry political rhetoric coming from both the American public and politicians extremely dangerous. Unfortunately, he sees no indication of this current trend easing up, especially with the 2022 midterms just around the corner. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
A life well lived. When we come back, we take a moment to honor the legacy of a dearly departed friend and colleague. Before we go, we want to acknowledge the loss of someone dear to the CBN News family.
Because there's some people that God wants to reach, Donna.
Yes,
you
Lord,
lead out
we
and
know,
I'll finish.
we know, Lord. Greater is He that is in me,
Yes,
in us, than he that is in the world. Jesus, you are so much greater.
Donna Russell was an integral part of the CBN News family from the moment she joined in 2007. She brought a smile and a sense of joy to every project she worked on, from our website to laying the foundation for the CBN News Channel, and often filling in as a producer for this program. Those who knew her best describe her as lovely, kind, and generous, reflecting a true friend in Christ by her willingness to immediately respond to pray with others when they had the need. Donna died after a long battle with COVID. We, along with her husband Charles and a host of family and friends, are better for having known her and carry her memory with us always. And with that, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.